All right, welcome to Beyond the Grid Adventures. I'm your host, Brevin Ingleson. We've got Matthew Bent, the CEO, and our special guest today is Chris Powell from the Houndsman XP podcast. He is going to be imparting some wisdom on us today, and we're just going to be talking about hounds. Right. No, man, I reached out to you, Chris, because somebody on Instagram had said you really need to go check out the Houndsman XP podcast. And I went and looked, and I was like, I should get in contact with Chris because he seems to be the one who has the handle on hounds. Like you are like the premier houndsman industry guy. So without further ado, I'm just hyping you up here. What is your story, Chris?
Gave me a pretty big buildup right there, which I don't deserve. We at Houndsman XP were the first to start a podcast. And the reason we started that was because I saw a lack of credible voice in the hunting space for houndsmen. When people tried to talk about it, I just didn't feel like they were hitting the mark. They were missing some key features and some things that we provide to the hunting space and to the hunting industry, and it just wasn't laid out completely. I'm not going to say it wasn't done well. I mean, there's some huge podcast companies out there that have promoted hound hunting and different things in different ways, but nobody was laser focused on who we are and what we do and what we contribute to the hunting space and the narrative of hunting. And through my profession, I'm a retired Indiana conservation officer. I worked here for 28 years in the wildlife profession. And I got the opportunity to sit in on a lot of different meetings and policy meetings. A lot of times we would get assigned to go to natural resources commission hearings and we weren't allowed to say anything. And I would see how misrepresented or underrepresented houndsmen actually were, even with state policymakers. And as I dove into that more and looked at across the country, houndsmen we just want to hunt. We just want to go out and do our thing, and people leave us alone. But in today's current climate in our space, we can't simply do that anymore. We have to be able to represent who we are, take control of the narrative. The anti-hunting crowd has hijacked the narrative and tried to paint a picture of who we are, and I will say that that's totally wrong. And so we jumped in and we started the Houndsman XP podcast. We've released 470 episodes, and we've talked about everything from basic care to ethics to interacting with different hunting groups such as turkey hunters, trappers, deer hunters, elk hunters, whatever it is. You know, and we try to talk about that and bridge those gaps in this hunting community because it's the only way we're going to survive into the future.
Okay. So when I think of hounds hunting, so I actually don't really know anything about it. So we're kind of focused on getting beginners out into the outdoors in general. And to a beginner, when they see somebody hunting with hounds, they probably have no idea what actually is happening. So would you mind kind of elaborating upon, like, hey, you're a beginner, what do you need to do to be a houndsman? What is it?
Well, for one thing, you got to start with the term houndsman, and that's something that Houndsman XP stands for Houndsman Extreme Performance, and we just thought that that was a fitting name because we wanted to showcase people that were living the lifestyle, that were very good at their craft, masters of their craft, and use that information to build each other up, sustain each other, and also help beginners who are getting into this thing. You know, my hope when we produce a podcast is that somebody takes away something that they can learn, even if you've been doing this for 40 years, like I have. I learn something every time I talk to even my guests, and I've talked to everybody from rookies to veteran houndsmen who've been doing it 20 years more than I have. And I always tell people, the only thing you've got to do to get old is to wake up. So age and wisdom don't necessarily transfer all the time. All right. So if I go into this thinking that I'm going to teach everybody else the things that I've learned, then I fail to learn myself. And I've learned stuff from guys that have been hunting for 5 years. I've learned things from guys that have been hunting for 60 years. So to start with, to become a houndsman, then I can't stress enough the importance of having a good mentor and almost doing an apprenticeship under an accomplished houndsman. Is it necessary? No. Sometimes the school of hard knocks is the best way to learn.
Right.
Just getting out there and getting after it, taking your lumps, doing things like that. But you're going to extend the time period that you're going to learn at that point. If you can find somebody around you who is, reputable, not going to get you in trouble with the law or whoever, and people that are consistently catching game, then you're going to be ahead of the curve at that point. So mentorship, being a mentee, is a good place to start. And I tell newcomers all the time, because you see them on social media, I get questions about it, I get asked about it, and I said, if you want to get started in hounds, buy yourself a really good pair of boots, a couple dog leashes, and your own Garmin system, and go find a houndsman and go with them and spend a year following them and their hounds around. You'll have a minimal investment at that point, and you'll find out if this is really what you want to do. Everybody always wants to go out and grab the dog. They always want to go out and grab, I'm going to get a puppy and I'm going to start with that. That's a recipe for failure. I'm just going to tell you right now, that's a recipe for disaster. I started that exact same way, and I can't tell you how many pups I went through that never worked out, not because the dog wasn't capable, but I didn't know what I was doing. And then it turned into a mediocre dog at best, And so my advice to any newcomer is to do that apprenticeship. Buy yourself a leash, buy your own tracking equipment and a good pair of boots, and go out and learn for a year. And then you can make a wise decision whether you really want to do it. If you don't like it, who doesn't need a dog leash for something? You can pull a deer out with a dog leash. I've done it many times, grabbed one off the truck and pull a deer out of the woods. And Garmin's, you can list them on Marketplace or on any hound group and sell them in a heartbeat. So minimal investment. Go into it with your eyes open.
So you mentioned they need to go ahead, Matt.
Sorry, I was going to say that's a really good point, because when you think about getting into hunting, there's a few things that you're like, I really need to get these items. Say I want to get into rifle hunting, I need a rifle, but these are really big investments that can scare away the beginner because they don't know what it means to get the right rifle, or in your case, the right hound. And then how do you utilize that in the right way to get to being successful? Your point is that you are looking at finding the right education, right? And by getting a small investment with the leash and with the Garmin, you are taking that step forward and investing into that goal of yours, but you're also taking the right step towards learning the real meaning behind this style of hunting, and finding that education with the expert or an experienced individual is going to get you significantly further down the road. And I wouldn't have put that together. I'm really into elk hunting, but I know that I wouldn't have ever gotten into it if it wasn't for my dad teaching me how to do it.
So yeah, one of the main things that you ask me, what is, how do you get started as a houndsman? And I think you finally evolve into this thing that while houndsmen are very utilitarian, we understand hounds and that they're there for a reason, and they're there for a management tool. They're there, for our own pleasure. But one thing that I would stress to any newcomer, if you go out and buy a Garmin, or even if you're an elk hunter and you buy a bow or a rifle or whatever you're going to do, that gun, that bow, that piece of equipment that is an inanimate object doesn't need daily care. You know, you have got to be willing to make every day. I can put my rifle in the gun safe and not look at it for 2 months if I don't want to, or 3 months, or however long. But that puppy that I'm bringing home, there is a responsibility that comes along with that, not only for its daily care, but to also optimize its bred purpose. I mean, nobody is going to go out and buy uh, uh, a colt off a secretariat just to stand there and look at it, and not try to reach its full potential. And that's what you're doing. I mean, think about it. When you go out and you buy it, you want to get the best bred hound that you can find, the one that's going to have the genetics to turn into the most prolific game catcher, things like that. We all want to start there, but just take into consideration, if you don't know what you're doing, what are your odds of success? And the guy that sold you that pup, more than likely, he's invested a huge part of himself into making sure that he's producing top quality, well-bred pups that have all the genetic makeups to be successful. So if you can get one as a rookie, if you can get one, because I won't sell them to people like that. And I know several other people that, and I don't sell pups anyway. I usually end up giving them away to accomplished people that I know are going to take my dogs and hunt them hard and make the most they can out of it. And so that's part of our responsibility too, not only to the dog, but also to the person or the men and the women behind that dog that have made that genetic cross to be successful. So I think there's a big responsibility here, a big responsibility on our part to do the best we can to a living creature. And that's one of the things that's missed so often with the anti-hunting public, the non-hunting public, and even other hunters in the space. To tell you the truth, they don't understand what a huge investment and what a huge relationship that a houndsman has with his dogs.
Yeah, I definitely see that. And I also noticed the fact that, especially in the anti-hunting area, that hunters get a bad rap for not caring about animals in general. Like, we're just out there to abuse and murder. But from my perspective of being a hunter for many years, that connection that you get with the animal that you're hunting, and I could see that as being the same with the animal that you're hunting with, is that you have a deeper connection that anybody could ever have. You're connected to that animal in a deeper relationship. It becomes your family in a lot of ways.
For sure. It's one of those deals that I was a law enforcement canine handler for a number of years during my career, and the bond and the relationship you build with a dog that's willing to give its life for you is pretty strong. And every one of these hounds are there. They are the one that's going to stand in the gap. And so I've got a responsibility to them for their willingness to serve. And I think it goes right along with all three of us are military veterans. If you can look at it in those terms, we've chosen to serve, and it's a lot the same. So.
Right. So I do like a lot of horsemanship stuff, and I've seen it, what you're talking about, where people won't sell those high priced hounds to rookies. It's the same thing in that industry, because you'll get these $100,000 horses, and you'll get this rich guy from California to come out and be like, "I'll buy that horse from you, sir." And the cowboy looks at him and is like, "Yeah, I don't think so. I'm not going to sell you this horse because you're just going to ruin it. You're going to end up actually hurting this horse because you don't know what the hell you're doing."
Yeah. Horses are a perfect example. We use them a lot in the podcast to try to explain things. But, anybody that takes a horse and makes it a pasture ornament has cheated the genetic makeup of that horse. They've cheated the horse. That horse was bred for a purpose.
Right.
And to think we're going to take it home and put it in a pasture and not use it, or give it to our 10-year-old daughter to, you know, be distracted by Instagram and TikTok and not take care of her horse. What are we doing here?
Right. And I know, so Buck Brannaman, he's a big name in the horse industry. He makes all these really nice horses, and he goes out and he does clinics, which I assume there's houndsman clinics as well. And every time I go to one, I hear people say, why doesn't he just sell us his horses? And the problem is, he thinks if you don't know how to make his horse, then you're going to ruin his horse. So why would he sell it to you? And I assume that's the same with dogs.
It kind of is. I think you need to be, I need to be careful. Let's just be honest here. I need to be careful about how, I don't like telling people how they need to do things or what they should do with something that's theirs. I've got some pretty strong opinions about it. But houndsmen are pretty good about recognizing the value of a good hound. And I've sold some hounds in my time, and people are really pretty cautious. You know, that at some point you're almost like, hey man, you bought that dog, you need to go use it for what you wanted. It's yours now, you know. But at the same time, it's kind of it also carries a part of me. And that's an interesting thought about Buck. You know, he doesn't want to, if you can't make the horse, you're not going to take mine and ruin it. So I've never really seen that kind of crossover. There's a few isolated cases out there that I know guys are very possessive of who their dogs go to. And there's a couple reasons for that. I think one of the reasons is they want to make sure that their breeding program is successful. And you're not going to be successful by saying, hey, pups out of this male dog and this female dog, you know, they've made great dogs. They made great hunting dogs. And you're not going to get there if you're selling them to fur mamas with an Instagram account. That's all they care about. You know, we don't care if you put sunglasses on them. We don't care if they eat ice cream for your TikTok video. We don't care. They're bred for a purpose, and that's to go out and help us manage wildlife.
Right. And you're talking like you said at the beginning, a utilitarian view of what people view houndsmen as utilitarians. So could you speak on the other side of that, as in you being the caretaker and kind of the bond that you have with your dog outside of it is bred for a purpose? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. This past, what was it? Was it June or August? I think it was June. Yeah, it was June. This past year, I was hunting in New Mexico, and I had a blue tick female that I raised from a puppy, and she's one of the nicest hounds I've ever raised, and she could just do whatever I needed her to do at the time. She started out as a coon hound in Indiana. I transferred her over as a bear hound. She caught lions. She got older, and she ended up getting killed in New Mexico this past spring. She was 8 years old. She was past her prime. I put a whole video together on our YouTube channel called Burying the Good Ones. And it still gets me a little bit emotional thinking about it. And I mean, this dog, when I brought her home, it was 9 below zero at my house. Brought her in the house. Didn't take about 20 minutes, and my daughter had a sweater on this puppy. And you know, raised her in the house. We've got pictures of her laying on the couch, and she's traveled thousands of miles with me, and I get attached to them. So utilitarian is kind of a mindset that we use. We have the realization that once we turn that dog loose to go do its job, we may never see it again, but it doesn't make it any less impactful when something happens to them. It was pretty emotional, really. I had her cremated, and I was away from home, had her cremated, hiked her back into the last tree she made in the mountains, and captured the whole thing on video right there, me spreading her ashes under that tree. That's what hounds mean to us.
That sounds like a brother in arms in a lot of ways. If you spend 8 years getting to know this, friend, this partner in your hunting career, and they start to know you. I mean, you're living together, you're working together, you're going out on a regular basis, and then, something happens, but that's the nature of the beast, unfortunately. That's kind of what we're getting into in the life that we live. But without that risk of losing that friend, there wouldn't be as much of a deep relationship with them. And that is life. That's not just a hunting fact. That's
yeah.
A
Every
fact.
relationship we have that's successful, we've taken risks to build it. Whether it's our wives or loved ones, whatever, you take risks at times to ensure that relationship is solidified and sustainable, and it can be taken away at any time. And so, while I'm realistic about the view of that fact, it just doesn't. It's still impactful, and it's still an emotional thing when we lose one. And I've seen some of the most rough, gruff guys you've ever met in your life lose a dog and carry him out of the woods in tears. And I guarantee you that you wouldn't want to go knuckle to knuckle with them any other time, and you're sure not going to laugh at them for being so emotionally attached to their hound.
And we see these anti-hunting groups that try and picture hunters as these emotionless animal murderers, but in reality, the impact that the animals have on the hunter is probably significantly more than the anti-hunters. So they'll go to the grocery store and they'll go get a hamburger, won't bat an eye, but then we'll go out and we'll shoot an elk. We'll bring our hounds with us. I won't, because I don't have any, but you'll bring your dog with you, and you actually get to witness the life being taken, and you get to be grateful for it, and you get to have that shared experience with your dog that they would never have. It's just
yeah, I can tell you that my dogs, when we're not able to get out and hunt, either season closures or things like that they're pretty lethargic. You can tell. They know when the truck pulls up and it's getting loaded and we're getting ready to go. You see a whole different gear in those dogs at that time. So it's a conditioned response. I get it. But the reason it is a conditioned response and they react that way is because they're genetically hardwired to do what they do when they get out of that truck at our destination. So there is a correlation there. While it's not an anthropomorphic type thing where it's like, your kid's getting excited on Christmas morning, it is a conditioned response and there's a reason for that conditioned response, and that's because of the genetic makeup that they have. As far as the anti-hunting crowd goes, they get everything wrong with hunting, and they definitely get it wrong with houndsmen. And we've been a favorite target for them for a long time, and a lot of it is our fault because we failed to represent who we are and what we do in a way that was beneficial for the lifestyle of being a houndsman. Nobody was connecting the dots in this thing. Houndsmen contribute a lot to wildlife management. Mule deer studies are dependent on houndsmen, and I'll just lay that out for you. So when we get involved in a mountain lion study to study predators, the biologists that are with us, we're able to not only collect the biological data on the lion itself, age, sex, body condition, DNA sampling, collar the lion, show its pattern of movement and all that stuff, but also we find these kills of like a mule deer. And the biologists will collect those bones and they'll take those bones back to the laboratory and they'll do an analysis on the bone marrow that's still in there and they can tell from that bone marrow, dietary needs, fat content, overall health, things like that. So they take that data and now they put it towards mule deer research. They watch mountain lion movement, and they go out and they find, okay, why is this mountain lion here in March? Why is he spending so much time here? So they go out to that area and they find plant species there that the mule deer are feeding on, or the elk or whatever, that are absent in other parts of this whole ecosystem. So then they start looking at habitat. Okay, so the elk are here, the predators are here. So boom, boom, boom. They're starting to put these pieces together. And it's because houndsmen are willing to take these biologists out to help study predators. The same goes for black bears and raccoons and a lot of different things.
Yeah, I find that the hunting, if you know it, you realize the amount of benefit that we have on protecting the wildlife that we hunt. Because if it's not for us protecting them, we can't then go hunt them in the future. And it also funds so much of that conservation that is done. The amount of money brought in through selling tags, and that's what funds the conservation in this nation, and that is on the backs of the hunter, which is a really valuable thing that we oftentimes overlook.
I often spend a lot of time thinking about how to break this down and present it in a way that people are just will more easily understand it. But the conservation movement started in 1873 with Byrd Grinnell and Teddy Roosevelt. Really, that's when we created the Boone and Crockett. They founded the Boone and Crockett Club. And then in the 1920s, think about this. When have you ever heard of a group of people that is willing to stand up and say, we know this is a problem, tax me, I want to help restore it. So that's when the Pittman and Robertson funds came into effect, the Wildlife Restoration Act, which sportsmen stood up across the nation and said, tax us, wildlife is in trouble, we want to restore it. Okay, so we've been doing that since the 1920s, almost 100 years ago. And in that time frame, not only have hunters been the beneficiary of that effort, but every citizen in the United States who enjoys looking at wildlife has benefited from that. So it's like a toll road where we are the commercial truckers and we say, hey, tax us for this because we need this road. We want to help pay for this road. And then everybody in a passenger car gets to ride down the road for free. Mm-hmm. That's the same concept here. It's like, I'm a hardcore football fan, and my favorite team, I'll buy a ticket and then you can let another 1,000 people in for free. I'll pay for it. We'll let them come in and watch too. That's what we've done as hunters.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I wish that there was a very simple way of explaining that same topic to the people that, get on our case, because they just see us for being people that are out there to kill stuff. We want to kill it for very specific reasons, but one of those reasons is without us, it can disappear completely.
And that's a hard one to draw a conclusion around for a lot of people. And it takes some explaining, but in order for this to work, and this is one of the reasons why we started the podcast, our network, is so if we say it enough, if we talk about it enough, then people will pick up on it. And what I've seen since we started the podcast is people who are saying the things that we have, answering questions, even in the social media space, with some of the things that we've explained on the podcast. And I'm not saying I take credit for it, but I have seen more of it. But it's going to take all of us. Every one of us goes to, the Memorial Day cookout. If you can find another guy there that hunts that you can talk to, you guys are going to drink some beer and talk hunting for sure. But more than likely, there's going to be 15 other people there that don't hunt. And not only do they not hunt, they don't know anything about hunting. So every one of us has a responsibility to be able to explain who we are and what we do and why it is important that we do this. You know, we have to be able to talk about wildlife management. Why is hunting important? Why do biologists set quotas? How can we influence those quotas? How much money do we put into hunting? All those sorts of things. We've got to, each one of us, I don't care if you're turning a hound loose or you're shooting an elk at 1,000 yards with a long range rifle. Doesn't matter to me. But you've got to be able to talk about the most important things and explain who we are and what we do.
Yeah.
And what values we add to our culture.
Yeah. And I'd say one takeaway that we could all get from this podcast is that we should be focusing on, I guess, the positives. From somebody who doesn't hunt that much, I would say that talking to you, Chris, has been a real blessing to me, because I get to see the houndsman side of this, and I get to see the conservation and what I didn't learn in school, public school, you more or less can relate to me when I meet you at the Memorial Day cookout. And I guess the hope would be that whoever listens to this would then go to the Memorial Day cookout and relay that information to people, so that there's not this random TikTok misinformation going about.
Yeah. And I think we as hunters have a responsibility not to add to the misinformation of social media. There aren't very many people that understand just a picture. They don't hear anything out of you for a month, and then all of a sudden they see a picture of you with a grip and grin and a big smile on your face with a dead animal. You know, what's the context there? It's very easy for them to take that out of context at that point.
I could probably stand on the same bridge. I very much getting passionate about it. The way that you were explaining it was very understandable, though, and I found that to be very beneficial, especially to anybody who might be listening. That, you know, this is something that we get passionate about because we really care about what we do. We love hunting, and we want to let other people know why we love it. And, you know, in some ways we go about saying that we love it, so they should stop hating on us for it. But
it seems like that should be an easy thing for people to understand, but I think that goes with, you know, the same problem I talked about losing control of the narrative. And I love hunting and I love wildlife. I'm more deeply connected with wildlife than any person who does not hunt. That wildlife is so important to me. Not only have I dedicated my whole adult life to being engaged in the wildlife management game, I've hunted the entire time. And I really think that the person who is willing to go out and hunt, even if you're against it, you're unsure, but you're willing to give it a try. If that person goes out and hunts and they take an animal and they can look back and say, man, that's not for me, I've got respect for that. I can live with that. The part that I can't live with is the part where people who have no experience, have no investment, they try to tell me what I should or should not do and convince me. What's their morality based on? What are their principles based on? I'm not saying that you have to go out and be a child molester to be against child molestation. That's not what I'm saying at all. But when you're talking about something that is as spiritually connective as a person that is willing to go out and invest their time, their money, but also their emotions into hunting, then they deserve to be to be heard. I don't live in Indianapolis, Indiana, and we have the Indianapolis 500 there every year on Memorial Day weekend. I don't get to have a say in parking up there in Indianapolis. So why do people think that something that they have no investment in, it doesn't affect their lives, they should have a say in whether or not I get to do this? Doesn't affect them. Matter of fact, what I do benefits them, because I guarantee you those same people like to drive through the state park and look at a deer. That deer would not be standing there if we hadn't said, tax us, we'll pay for it, so you can go look at it and then vote against me in the fall when it's on the ballot. Maybe we're the dumb ones. Maybe we're the dumb ones. But the first tenet of the North American model for wildlife conservation is wildlife is a public trust. And that means that we have gladly stepped up and said, we will pay for this so that Karen can go drive through the park and tell me that I'm wrong. Okay, go ahead. But don't expect me to take that without fighting. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, in some ways I find it back down to our connection with like the military, right? There's only 1% of our population that's willing to raise their right hand and say, hey, I want to go out there and fight for the rights of every American, even if that means that you're going to talk bad about me later on, if you're going to abuse me when I'm done with all of my serving. This is something that, as an American, I feel is the right thing to do, and I'm going to take that step in doing the right thing. It's the same thing with hunting. I'm here to hunt, but the steps that I take with hunting are conserving the population of the wildlife that I hunt. We're bringing back the elk, the deer, the bears, the ducks. We're bringing back all these species that were essentially getting destroyed by our expansion into this country. And now we have them, and we can continue to have them for years to come, so that anybody can go out to our national parks and see them, or down to the local state park, or wherever you find your wildlife. Anybody can enjoy it, but
and drive down the same roads in the National Forest or BLM that we do, and go observe wildlife and take pictures of it. Go take pictures of it, but make sure you thank a hunter when you're enjoying your day, because they wouldn't be there without us. Brevin, you brought up something that a minute ago about people going to the grocery store. It amazes me the people that will kill a cow with their checkbook, but they can't actually do the killing themselves. Hunters are saying we're responsible. We're responsible for wildlife being here. We're responsible for the management of it. And sometimes that includes calling the herd, because too much wildlife means bad things. Too little wildlife, too few wildlife species on the landscapes throws ecosystems out of balance. So the reason this is all set up with science-based wildlife management is so we can effectively manage this wildlife for that first tenet of the wildlife North American model, and that is so it can be a public trust, so we can all enjoy it.
Yeah. The whole kill the cow at the checkbook thing, I'm gonna start saying that when I talk to people. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing though. People will go, because we're in Montana, right? We're elk central. People will go to the fancy restaurant and they'll order venison burgers or venison steak or elk steaks. Right? Yeah, it's natural protein.
Raised in a farm, fed feed from the row croppers, but it's organic protein. It's cleaner than you going out and killing that elk in the mountains.
Yeah, I think it's just people don't necessarily want to think. They just hop on the trend. Whatever is trendy, I feel like people are just going to hop on and they're going to say those things without actually thinking about it. More or less.
People don't think about, you can't undo 10,000 years of DNA hardwiring in a couple generations. It just doesn't happen. And if you look at the development of the United States in 1776, 86% of our population had direct ties to agricultural based. They worked with their dads, they worked with their mothers, they were on the farm, they were working, they knew where their meat came from. You fast forward that to the 1940s, and we were down to around 43%. And then since then, today we're at 3% of our population has any ties or any understanding to an agricultural based lifestyle at all. So it's no wonder, but I make that point to say this. I think human beings are still genetically hardwired that way. There's a reason why the guy living in the suburb goes out and he manicures his lawn and he landscapes. People have to be doing something with their hands in the dirt. And you can try to lie to yourself all you want, but I have more respect for the person who is willing to go out and face the challenges and go out there in the field and bring home that elk, bring home that deer, grow their own food. That sort of stuff takes more courage than sitting behind a computer screen and shooting darts and sitting on your moral pedestal telling the whole world why they're so wrong and so uneducated and knuckle draggers and all this other garbage. At least the person that's out there working with their hands in the dirt is willing to take a risk and give it a try. I think we're all hardwired that way anyway. And that's why we spend billions of dollars on cutting freaking grass. It's like, I got to do something with the land to stay connected.
That's a really good point. I find that it's also a level of discomfort, right? So we are getting closer and closer to the most comfortable lifestyle we can manicure into our society. But we're hard wired into doing tough things. We find satisfaction in the challenges that we put ourselves through. And we'll put ourselves through all sorts of odd challenges nowadays so that we can find that satisfaction. But what you're pointing at is that back in the day, that wasn't a thing that you got to choose. You just had a challenge. And that challenge was to live, to work in the dirt, to go out and find and harvest those things that you needed to survive. We now have to build a challenge and getting back into the land, going after the wildlife that we're taking care of, to take that and bring it into the house, to process it, to eat what you harvest. That's that satisfaction that really brings life back to our roots. And I think it takes away a lot of the issues that you might find in healthcare and our mental state. And oh yeah, that's a bucket of worms. But one more reason that I would advocate for somebody who's even thinking about getting into hunting to go do this is because it is a challenge. It's something that if they don't take that step forward or find that person to help them take that step forward, they're just going to be, disappointed, probably frustrated and lost, looking for another challenge. So
yeah, I guess the modern day challenge is trying to figure out how to make crickets into cheeseburgers, and how cute does something have to be before it's morally wrong to eat it? Really, when you get down to it, it doesn't have eyelashes, so it must be okay to eat. No, that's not the case. I think the thing that people really miss, and I'll just talk on predator hunting because Colorado is going through a ballot initiative this year. Right now, the initiative number is ballot initiative 91, but it's basically a hunting ban. And it's to ban the hunting of mountain lions and bobcats. And the proponents of this ballot initiative have tried to say that they're endangered, that there isn't enough biological data out there to support hunting. I mean, just lie after lie after lie. There is no other North American wildlife species that has more biological data collected and 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 deposited with the scientists, the biologists in our state game agencies than the mountain lion. There are so many hoops that a houndsman has to jump through if they decide to harvest a mountain lion. It's got to be checked in. They got to surrender the skull. All the meat has to come out of the field. They do, and then they do all the DNA sampling, and then the biologists take all those metrics and crunch the numbers and put them together and say, these are your quotas, these are your female quotas. You can't. There's size limits and age limits on what you can take. So there is no other wildlife species that is more heavily regulated than the mountain lion, especially in the state of Colorado. There's tons of data on that. And the reason I bring that up is because the false narrative that is being shoved down our throat, along with cricket burgers and green energy and all this other stuff, is that we, are doing this sort of stuff because we're barbarians and we just like to kill stuff. And we're doing it without any conscience or any thought. Well, I can tell you that hunters will be the first ones to step up when wildlife numbers, if they would dwindle. We're experiencing wildlife populations right now on this continent that are higher than pre-colonial times. It's well documented. But if we get to the point where the wildlife numbers are not sustainable, hunters are going to be the first ones to step up and say, hey, we need to pump the brakes. I think we're getting there on wild turkeys personally in certain parts of the country. We're starting to see some real dips in numbers and habitat loss. And I think you're going to see it in the next few years where hunters are stepping up and saying, hey, we got to pump the brakes. And we've done it with a black bear in the Appalachians. We've done it with animals all across the landscape. That's how this whole wildlife management thing got started.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're doing that up in Montana right now. There's the question about whether or not you put wolves back on the endangered species list, which, from my point of view, doesn't make a lot of sense when they're overpopulated throughout the state, and that's well documented. And also the question on, do we take grizzly bears off the endangered species list? Because currently in Montana we have multiple deaths yearly from hunters, hikers, bike backpackers, that shows that the grizzly bear population is at a sustainable level, but it's also encroaching and endangering areas where people have already established. And even just a little bit of hunting would show a great change in that from my point of view, because grizzly bears and wolves are not stupid animals. They understand that they can get hunted, and when they do, they move their area of living away from the populated areas. And it just takes a couple of, you can make a ton of money off of some tags by selling 2 or 3 grizzly bear hunts in Montana, and also put that mindset back into the grizzly bear, saying, hey, this is no longer a reasonable place for you to come and look for your food. But that's on conservation. That's something that hunters have to keep working at, putting their voice out there, working together.
Problem with the Endangered Species Act and the endangered species list is, once an animal goes on the ESL, they're very hard to get off of there. The grizzly bear is a perfect example of that. It has maxed out its survivability and sustainability in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem out there, and to the point where it's trying to expand its range. It's at its limit now. I'm just curious when hunters are going to rise up and file suit. Somebody's going to file a suit for a wrongful death class action suit against either Montana, Wyoming, or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And if you're a guide or an outfitter and you're guiding anywhere in the Teton Range or anything below Bozeman there down towards Big Sky or down through that country, man, you are taking your life in your own hands every time you leave the truck, and heaven forbid you shoot a grizzly bear and it makes it to social media because you're going to get death threats from the anti-hunting crowd. Even when you're protecting your own life, these people value wildlife, animal life more than they value human life. And that's a problem. But don't make a mistake. I mean, that wolf and that grizzly bear has a lot of dollar signs tied to it. When you can put a picture of a wolf and make it your trademark iconic creature to raise money so that I can, I'm the CEO of I Love Wolves Forever. And, all of a sudden I've set myself up where I can make a 7-figure income every year and afford a place in Big Sky, Montana, because all of a sudden I have this fuzzy, warm feeling for wolves. No, I don't. I have a fuzzy, warm feeling for money going in my bank account. And that's what drives that whole thing.
It's very financially driven, and that's a disappointment because we as hunters are fighting against a big corporation that has a lot of money backing it. But we also know that our experience with the wildlife and our ability to continue doing what we do depends on taking care of the wildlife where they're at. And those grizzly bears are supposed to be up in the mountains, not down in our towns, eating out of our trash cans, eating our pets at home. And they have to be at some point regulated.
Yeah, I'm on the board of directors for the American Bear Foundation that's based in Cody there. And a lot of the money that we spend is for conflict mitigation between grizzly bears and people. Mm-hmm. We spend a lot of money on that every year.
Now, I hate to interject into this conversation, but I would like to wrap things up for us. And I would say that if you are a beginner and you want to go hunting in Montana specifically, they have invented this crazy thing called bear spray that will actually more or less protect you from a grizzly bear. But you should also have a piece on you as well. If not to kill the bear, to kill yourself. Because if you're getting mauled by a grizzly bear, you might want to end it. I
didn't know we could be that politically incorrect.
This time it seems
awesome.
Go for it, bro.
Right. Listen, all I'm saying is if you're getting mauled by a grizzly bear, you might want to end it. It's fine. If I said it as the person who doesn't do a lot of hunting, you'll be fine. But I appreciate you coming on, Chris, Houndsman XP. I appreciate you coming, talking to the Empty Spaces Outfitters crew. And I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation that we had. I know that Matt also had a great time. Just look at him. Look at that mustache moving. But yeah, if you are a beginner hunter, I would say go over to the Houndsman XP podcast and check out what they have going for them. And I know Chris mentioned finding a mentor. That's something that literally works all across the board for whether that's hunting, hiking, camping, literally anything in your life. If you find a mentor, you're gonna shortcut all of the school of hard knocks that Chris talked about. So, without further ado, thank you for watching the podcast. If you guys have any parting shots, now is your time.
Well, thanks for having me on. And people can find our podcast. You can go to our website at houndsmanxp.com. And I just appreciate you guys reaching out, man. I like doing these sort of things.
Chris, I really enjoyed talking. This is a great learning experience for me, just to see a little bit more about hound hunting. Something that I haven't ever thought of really getting into because of where I live, but I know that it's quite the thing to get into. And you have...
I know a few houndsmen around Bozeman there. Reach out to me. we'll try to get you hooked up if you decide you want to go.
I know that lion hunting is a big thing around here with hounds, and I think it could be a lot of fun to do that one day. So I will reach out to you if that becomes an opportunity for me. And if you ever get a chance to come up to Montana and you want to go elk hunting, I can't say that we have any special locations, but I wouldn't mind taking you out, or at least pointing you in the right direction if necessary. So, but thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
But